Welcome to Talking Tech with Creatives podcast. My name is Stella Oni, and I've got an exciting guest for you today. I'm going to introduce Dr. Chenai Gondo, award-winning. My eyes will be sideways because I'm reading about her and I'll be looking at you. Dr. Chenai Gondo is a British-Zimbabwean business strategist, an entrepreneur with a rich background in real estate, technology, and sustainability. Her career spans roles in academia, management consulting, and executive leadership. She has led and executed multi-million pound mergers and acquisitions, transformed businesses through digital innovation, and driven growth across sectors, including real estate, PropTech, real estate services, pharmaceuticals, life sciences, medical devices, and infrastructure. I'm blown away. She's an award-winning thought leader. She has been recognized by the UK PropTech Association, EG Tech Awards, and BizNow Women Leading Real Estate, and is a frequent lecturer at leading universities, including Oxford, Cambridge, and Reading, where she mentors the next generation of innovators. It's so impressive. I don't even know where to start. So I'm just going to go to Chenai and I'm going to ask, how did you start? Tell us about yourself.
Oh, hi, Stella. I want to start by saying I'm so honored to be a guest on your podcast. Where do I begin? I love talking about my career because it was really meandering. And early on in my career, I had this feeling of real insecurity and despair almost. I actually started out my career as a research scientist. I have a PhD in synthetic chemistry. That's why she kept referring to me as doctor, which nobody does except my mom. You know, when I'm from Zimbabwe, when I'm in Africa, people love using your titles, but everywhere else, nobody does. But I have a PhD. And I kind of fell into that because I would say growing up in Zimbabwe, nobody really tells you that you should love your job.
Mm-hmm.
The rule is get a job that pays well, that's secure, best case that gets you a green card or a visa. I was working in the US at the time. Mm-hmm. I was pretty good at chemistry, so I fell into that and realized when I was doing a PhD, because that's what you do if you want to be a serious scientist, that I absolutely hated it. I was miserable and I wanted to quit. I called my dad and he said, Chenai, don't quit, because someone out there, if you just finished the PhD, will be like, this girl's pretty smart and they can give you a job doing anything else. So I powered through, I finished it. And true to form, as soon as I finished my PhD, I was almost 30 years at the time, I became a management consultant. So that was my first foot in the door in the world of business. I went to join a big management consulting firm in their Zurich office. So it was called McKinsey and Company.
I know them.
And the beginning, because of my background in science and my background in research, and I had worked in pharma before I began my PhD. My first clients were all pharmaceutical companies, but it was great because I was doing something different. I was working on strategy. I was working on mergers and acquisitions. I was working on transactions, deciding where to invest money. And then after a while, I thought, let me reinvent myself. At the same time, I moved to the London office where there were much broader clients. And I did a lot of work in due diligence, helping private equity firms decide which types of businesses to invest in. And so when Stella, at the beginning, when you were giving my introduction of the industries I've worked in, a lot of those broader industries came from my time as a management consultant, which I did for about 4 years, during which time I took a maternity leave. I had my first child. My career in real estate actually became after that. I was headhunted by a big real estate investment trust, and they knew I had no experience in real estate, but they said, we look for people who understand strategy. You know strategy, that's great. We can teach you the real estate part. Is fairly straightforward. Went to work there as a senior strategy executive. And the CEO at the time was really, really keen on understanding what the potential was for digital transformation, for investment in technology for the real estate company. So one of the things I did, in addition to asset management strategy, operational strategy, but was really looking into real estate technology. And it was a fantastic time. We made direct investments into a really big venture capital firm, one of the biggest PropTech venture capital firms, and I was their main point of contact. So I managed that relationship. We made direct investments into a couple of real estate technology firms. And then we also drafted the end-to-end real estate technology strategy for the business.
How long ago was this? Sorry, how long ago was
This
this?
was I joined the company in 2018 and I stayed until 2022. So that was all the stuff that I was doing at the time. And it was awesome because it was like uncharted territory. And, our team was working on all of this stuff that was just new and exciting and wonderful.
Mhm.
And I got such a taste for real estate technology that I said, oh, my next job is going to be in real estate tech. So I went to work for an AIM-listed real estate technology company as a chief of staff to the CEO. So there worked on strategy, helping transformation, helping grow the business, and really think about the direction. It was post-COVID, so it was like a slightly different challenge than what we were expecting because I think the tech bubble was just bursting. And then after that, I left, and that is when I co-founded my first PropTech venture, which I did for a couple of years until I exited that at the end of last year. And now I do a number of things. I advise in real estate technology. I invest in real estate technology. And I also have a couple of ventures that have nothing to do with real estate, which I'm happy to talk about as well. That's me in a nutshell. And I feel very lucky because of the role I had at the big real estate investment trust. I was able to, a lot of people would approach me to advise startups. So I was in a couple of startup advisory programs. One was, I was like a mentor through Pi Labs, which is a big real estate technology VC. I was a mentor through Reach. I joined the board of the UK PropTech Association, which is the biggest UK membership organization for property technology companies. And I also am now on the advisory board. I'm the chair of the advisory board for a really cool real estate technology company called Locale. And I do a lot of work with them, which I absolutely love.
Fantastic. So we're going to go back and I'm going to tease out some things a little bit because, all
Yeah.
new to me. Because, Talking Tech We Create looks at technology in different sectors. And I've covered different sectors, including even couture. So now we're looking at PropTech. So the first time I heard about PropTech was, it was me researching you. I didn't know anything about property technology or in any way. So the first thing is, what is PropTech? Tell us what PropTech is.
Do you know what? It's the first thing is that even the term PropTech is very controversial.
Okay.
Many people who work in real estate technology hate the term. But I would say it's an umbrella term for any technology at all that impacts on the built environment. And it's controversial because there are some companies that I would consider PropTech companies that even maybe that company itself doesn't consider itself PropTech. So like Airbnb, I think is PropTech because it is a tool that allows you to monetize, whether it's your house when you go on holiday, your spare bedroom when you go on holiday, and so on. But there are many different ways to look at it, but it's any technology that impacts on the built environment. And that includes hardware. So if you have a building and you want to have smart sensors installed in that building, anything to do with the Internet of Things that helps you operate your building better, understand your building better, if you put sensors that allow you to detect whether or not there's mold in your building, or even in the houses that we live in, if you have a smart thermostat, I consider that to be a form of PropTech. If you have your Ring doorbell that allows you to have better security in your building, that's PropTech. But then there are other solutions that are software. So whether they are marketplaces, if it's something like a Rightmove or a Zoopla that allows you to have better information on what's happening on the ground, better data on the property valuations, you can have software solutions so there's marketplaces, there's software solutions that allow you to better understand the value of your data. So I'll use the example of the business that I co-founded that I've subsequently exited. That business was one where we used to say to clients, give us your addresses. We tell you outside in what the energy efficiency of your properties is, and we tell you outside in what it would cost you to improve the energy efficiency of your properties. The interesting thing about PropTech is there are overlaps between PropTech and FinTech, because a lot of times what is enabling innovation in property is easier transactions, better data. There are huge overlaps between PropTech and climate tech because property is one of the most egregious sectors when it comes to carbon emissions, when it comes to actually making the world warmer. This is a very clumsy way of talking about global warming. Property is one of the most egregious. So when you can tackle that, oftentimes it's property solutions. I was spending time in Africa, and I've been spending a lot of time looking at the African PropTech environment. There you'll see more overlaps between PropTech, agri-tech, which doesn't always seem like property, but in some ways it is, where it comes to like basic infrastructure. When you look at things like solar panels, how do you actually enable homes to be warmer? When you look at things like heat pumps, that is a play prop tech, and it's a play on technology. So it's super broad. It's super broad. And so people will normally focus or play on one sector of it. I didn't talk about construction tech. There's construction technology. How do you build places better? Modular home technology. All of that is technology. So people will normally hone in on one. People have a specialty on one because it's so broad. You can't be the king of everyone. You have to know what your area is and double down on that. So whether it's sectors, because property, obviously, you have residential, which is massive. There's the residential, which is like to let, or they're like individual homeowners, which are the most of the value of properties is in our individual homes that we live in. But the technology you use for a retail asset is different than an office, which is different than logistics, industrial, storage. So it really, really differs by subsector. It differs by whether it's operational, real estate, so whether it's actually what you do to manage the property every day, or whether it's like the management of the asset, which is around the data and how do you prove that the valuation of the property is better. It differs in many ways.
And me just looking at it, it's huge. I can see that, and it's part of our everyday. So it's part of anybody's everyday life because we all live in properties anyway. I'm broadly speaking, yeah, we all live under a roof somewhere.
Yeah.
So it is huge. So the thing I'm looking at is, and you did talk about the integrations. I call it integrations because you'll be working in partnership with different. You probably, like you said, not going to be able to do it alone. So you either work in partnerships or there's some kind of integration. Do you think?
Yes, I have seen a lot of integrations. For example, if you have, and this is probably not so different in property versus in other sectors, if you have a solution, a lot of times, because the thing about property is that when you're investing in property, it's an asset that you hold for a long time. It's not like just having software, when you invest in something, it's for the long term. For example, if you have a new tenant engagement app that you want to launch for everybody, and then the person who launches that app said, and you can use that app to access all of the areas to go into your building. It's unlikely that you as a building owner are going to rip out all of your doors and going to put in new doors that basically work with that app. Most likely you're going to want the person who runs that app to create integrations so that all of your building and property management can still speak to that app. So many of the things that are already in there, whether you have smart lifts, whether you have smart access control, security systems, dashboards that allow the property managers to understand what's happening everywhere and change the temperature. The key is often to make sure that new solutions integrate well with everything that already exists, rather than having to rip out everything every time you have a new solution that's in some ways a bit of a point solution.
And for me, just thinking about it from my layman's point of view, I still feel that there's a kind of, I don't feel it comes together. I don't know whether there's one organization or one company that would pull everything together and actually have a seamless, like when you have a seamless way of running. I don't see that. I feel that there's different, like you said, there are different aspects of the sector anyway. So maybe that's why I'm seeing for me, it's like fragmentation, because you have the landlord, you have the tenant, you have people like you who are in strategy, you have, they have different parts. You
Yeah,
have,
it comes down to the use case. It
mm-hmm,
comes down to the use case. Who wants to use the data and for what purpose?
mm-hmm,
So the data that, if you have a building, let's say you are a commercial landlord and you have a building, the information that your property manager who's on the ground, who needs to manage the property on a day-to-day basis, and the technology that they need to use is very different to the information that your occupier, who
mm-hmm,
is the person who's rented the space from you, needs
mm-hmm,
to see, which is very different from the end user, maybe like the person who just walks through your campus every day on their way to, get their lunch, or they're one of the people who like is a desk user in there, which is
mm-hmm.
very different than maybe the people who are bringing deliveries to your building, which is very different than the repair people. And
That's it. Yeah.
repairmen. I said repairmen come. So there's going to be, let's say you have a technology that allows you to do predictive maintenance. So it
Mm-hmm.
tells you when your lift breaks down, or when your lift is about to break down, it tells you, oh, we have figured out lift XYZ is about to break down. Here, you need to call a maintenance person and basically direct them to repair it in this particular place. Not everybody needs that information, but the people who need it really, really need it. So there's huge potential, but again, not all information matters to everybody.
So who are the people adopting the technologies now? Is it just big organizations, or is it small and little? I'm just curious.
It depends on the technology, doesn't it?
Mm.
It depends on the technology. I think that real estate has always been a bit slower to adopt technology. And I talked about it. It was because we have very long investment cycles. You have to also understand the way that real estate works financially. When you make certain types of investments, you really need for them to either A, not become obsolete overnight so that the investment ends up being a complete dud and a waste of time, but one that you can meaningfully link to a valuation improvement in your property, whether through driving better rents from your tenants or driving better retention, so lower vacancy periods, or in some other way, like reducing the operational cost of managing that property. So for many of the solutions that you see, unless you can tie it to one of those things pretty clearly, it's hard to justify the investment. But there are investments being made across the board. I think bigger organizations are obviously in a place where they're more able to trial things. So if you have a large commercial landlord, many of them have their own heads of technology, or they have their own innovation teams, or they work with consultants who specialize in that, and they can do that. But remember that real estate is very fragmented in the UK, particularly in residential.
Very much. See?
So when you go, yeah, so when you go beyond the top 10%, like the average landlord, these are people who might have like 2 or 3 properties, residential landlords, like 2 or 3 properties. It's just you, me, my auntie. She's a landlord. She has 3, 4 properties. She's not going to be investing in like a dedicated solution for herself for those 3 or 4 properties. But interestingly, there are more and more solutions that are more like B2B to C that target people like that. So you don't necessarily have to make a huge investment from yourself up front, but it allows you to manage even a tiny portfolio a bit better.
I want to move back to strategy now, because strategy sounds like, for people who are on different levels, just want to understand how you define strategy. I'm sorry to pin you down, because I know that it's going to be very hard for you to define. But
no, it's not.
Okay, let's say, for example, you're a new executive starting out. You understand where I'm coming from. So you start getting your promotion, and then at some point you move into strategy. How important is it to, number one, help us to understand what strategy means, and how important is it for organizations? Let's put it that way. Let me make it simple.
Oh, strategy is so important. You know, I'm going to look at my screen because, interestingly enough, this is a bad plug, but it's a plug nevertheless. I actually wrote something on my LinkedIn a few weeks ago, which was a basic how-to on strategy. And it was because I noticed how many organizations I come across, how many organizations I work with haven't invested in strategy. Because people often think of strategy as something that's reserved for really big organizations that have massive strategy departments, and that's not right. Strategy is basically for any business of any size. And this is a post that I made about a month ago. So let's say right now we're in April. So let's say sometime in May. And it's really an overview of what strategy is and what it is not. And I think in the simplest term, so that was me directing everybody to go and check it out. It's on LinkedIn. Yes. And the reason I put it together was because I was on another podcast. I was asked to come and do a masterclass, a teaching for entrepreneurs, small business owners, to just give them a masterclass on strategy 101, how to develop like a really quick fire strategy for your business. In its simplest term, what strategy is when you think about your vision, where you want to be as an organization or as an individual. You can have a strategy for your own personal career, but let's say we're focusing on business, where you want to be. Your strategy is the playbook for how you actually intend to reach those goals. So a lot of times people will think the strategy is just the dream itself, and say, I want to do this, I want to be this, but that's not strategy. It's not a simple goal. It's also not a budget. It's not simply saying, therefore, I'm going to spend this much money on marketing. That's my strategy. It involves looking at yourself internally, understanding what your strengths are, understanding what your weaknesses are. It involves looking at your surroundings, understanding where the opportunities are and how they play into your strengths, understanding where the threats are and how they play into your strengths and your weaknesses or whatever, and then making a plan that takes into consideration all of those things. And a plan that constantly, if you have to ask yourself, what would you have to believe in order for that strategy to be successful, in order for that strategy to be true, every time you ask yourself what you would have to believe, and if what you've asked yourself, the answer is something that you do believe and is true, you're on the right track. And it's in the simplest form. And people have strategy for like military strategy, for like war, how you're going to defeat your enemy, business strategy, personal strategy. It's literally just the how you plan to achieve the goals that you have set out. What are the steps you're going to take, the actions that sit behind them,
And
and
actually,
why you believe those things will work.
yeah, and actually asking for help when it's required, because sometimes you do your strategy, but you might be looking too internally, or you might be too close to, yeah, too close.
Yes, you don't want to look too internally. Don't focus on yourself only. You don't want to spend too much time being external, only looking at other people and not doing a rigorous interrogation of yourself. You have to do a bit of both. And you have to plan. A lot of people are very good at writing down strategy and not very good at execution, where something like 70% of all strategies fail. That's a statistic that I actually forget where I got it from. I was about to quote somebody and then I realized maybe not, because I don't want to get in trouble. But according to a big management consultancy that I'm very familiar with, something like 70% of all strategies fail. And it's not because those strategies are fundamentally bad strategies. It's because the skill that it takes to actually execute a strategy is very different than the skill to think up a strategy. And it's a different skill set. Some people are really good. They're the ideas people, the ideas man, or the ideas woman. They're good at throwing out ideas left and right. But then the actual rigor and consistency that it takes to drive that to execution is very different skill set.
Wow. So you need different kinds of people to get it going. So if you were an individual, because of course strategy works for individuals as well, right?
Oh yeah, I have strategy. I have personal strategy. I wasn't personal
Uh-huh.
strategy.
So what do you advise for individuals and how this, especially in today's world? And you can see
Oh.
the way today's world is. What is your advice for individuals?
So is this for a career strategy, a personal, like what aspect are we strategizing right now?
Personal and career, because it goes together.
Do you know one thing is to really think about, what do you actually want? What do you actually want? Because a lot of people are just coasting, which is fine. It's important to coast. Bills need to be paid. When you have a secure job that's paying your bills, you have a secure job that's paying your bills. Maybe it doesn't light your heart on fire. Maybe you don't wake up every day with a spring in your step. I totally get that. But what do you actually want? And why do you want it? Because actually, for many people, let's talk about your career. For many people, the path to their happiness has nothing to do with their career. Their career is a means to an end. Their job is just, it's a great way to get the bills paid, and they find their passion and their purpose from doing other things. Other things, whether it's time with your family, working on your health. I practicing yoga, going to church, doing activism in their community. There are many, many ways for people to find fulfillment, right? But ask yourself whether you're someone like me. For me, my career is actually one of the big parts of my identity. I derive a lot of pleasure from my career. But then in asking yourself, what do you want from your career? Ask yourself, what do you want and why do you want it? Do you really want that? Because you often have the situation where you think you want something, and then when you get it, you're like, whoops.
I got it.
It didn't give me what I wanted.
Next.
Yeah. One of my favorite TV shows is this show called BoJack Horseman. It's on Netflix, and it's an animated show about this crazy messed up horse. And there's an episode where he's crazy, he's messed up, he's flawed in every way possible. I don't love him, but I love the show. And there's an episode where he gets nominated for an Oscar. And he's been trying so hard to get nominated for an Oscar. He's been trying so hard. It's been like his whole dream. He keeps thinking, if I could just get nominated for an Oscar, I just know my whole life would change. And then he gets nominated for an Oscar and he's like, I feel. And then he's like, oh, the same.
What?
And he's so disappointed because he realizes that after working and striving to get this thing that he thought once he had this thing, everything would be different. And then he feels exactly the same. And everyone's like, oh, don't fetishize your unhappiness. Just get on with it. But I've seen a lot of people who think they want something And then they're like, oh, and then when it comes, they're like, I feel the same.
Oh
So think
dear.
about what it is that you really want,
Yeah.
and then assess yourself. Ask yourself whether, and this is something like I'm one Black woman talking to another, and I'm going to assume a lot of the people who are watching this podcast are going to be Black women, right? Ask
Possibly.
yourself what you're capable. Huh?
I've got a mixed audience,
You
but
got a
yeah.
mixed audience, but this is one in particular that I'm going to say.
Mhm.
Understand your own strengths and capabilities, but make sure that you understand them. Make
Mhm.
sure that you for yourself understand them. Don't. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, Chai, you know how, do you ever get imposter syndrome? I said, absolutely not.
Oh my God,
I
you're
don't have the luxury of imposter syndrome. I've never had the luxury of doubting myself because I'm constantly having to prove myself to other people. I have to fight my corner, being an immigrant, being an African, being a woman, all of that. And so some people don't have the luxury of imposter syndrome. So make sure you are really clear on your own value. And
Mhm.
you need to believe in yourself. You have to back yourself because nobody else will.
Yeah.
That's part of it when I say understand yourself internally, your surroundings.
Mhm.
And you have to back yourself. You have to believe you're capable of it because if you don't, you basically stop at zero.
Yeah.
Back
Absolutely.
yourself. There's no room for imposter syndrome. There's none. There's just none
Yeah.
because people might already think you're an imposter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I
you have
see.
to back yourself and then the surroundings and then ask yourself, how do you get there? How do you do it? I know it's vague, but it's also very specific to the right person who's hearing it. I
Mhm.
think you understand what I'm saying.
Perfect. So I want to ask about creativity because I know that, all of that, the joy and how you enjoy what you do has to come from somewhere. So give me an idea because I know me and you, we met. I didn't even talk about how we met at a book event.
I have read your book. At least I know I've read one. I've read Deadly Sacrifice. I have not read Midnight Hour yet.
Midnight Hour is an anthology, so I've got short story in there.
Okay,
I've
yeah,
got book
I've read
two.
Deadly Sacrifice. I read it after I met you.
Finally, book two is finally coming out next year,
I'm
hopefully.
very excited. Is it the same characters?
Same characters. I've just finished the first draft. Finally, I wrote the end today. The end. I could not believe it. But the end of a first draft, as any writer knows, is just the beginning of work.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
going to be more work to be done on it. But yeah, the story is virtually done in that way, at least first draft. And
Yes.
that's 5 years from having to think, okay, what else are these characters doing in the next year? So yeah, go on. So tell me about where all the joy comes from, your creativity, the things you love, and how that feeds into what you do. Because I know it does. I can see the way you're brimming.
Um, I am a very creative person. There was this website in the early 2000s. Like if you lived in the US, it was a tongue-in-cheek irony website, and it was called like Stuff White People Like or something. It was like silly, and it would have things like Tom's toothpaste, and it was really like stuff middle class people like, right? And one of the things was like they're all secretly writing a book. And then I was like, are they? Other people besides me are like secretly writing a book.
Okay.
And I realized I'm not that original in that I am secretly writing a book, but I think a lot of people are secretly writing a book. But I take a lot of pleasure from that, reading, writing, and I have been writing, especially when I go through like challenges. I find it quite inspiring. It inspires my characters. It inspires the movement of my characters forward. And sometimes I've done a thing where I've written something and then I come back to it a year or two later and then I hate it and I'm like, ugh, this is awful. I would never
Really?
read this boring, self-involved, so narcissistic.
Judging
What a
yourself.
boring little story. Because I write basically what I write is short stories. They're not that short. My favorite writers are people like it's a combination. I love Chimamanda. I love a woman called Mary Gateskill. Very niche. Absolutely love her style. I love Augustine Burroughs. And now I feel bad because I feel like I'll definitely miss some people out.
Yeah.
And then when you say that, I love a Zimbabwean writer called Petina Gapa who writes short stories incidentally.
I
Yeah,
look
I
for.
like writing short stories in the first person.
Mm-hmm.
But I have other forms of creativity. So I'm a gardener, and my garden is my absolute pride and joy. I live in a village in Hertfordshire, and I joke about how the guy who runs the garden center up the street from my house is my dealer. Somebody was like, "Your dealer? What does he deal?" I said, "Plants." They said, "What kind of plants?" I said, "No, no, no. This isn't code. It's that I show up at the garden center and I'm always like, what have you got this week? And then he's like, oh, I have some of these. And then I always find a spot for them. But
what do you plant?
oh, everything. I have a pretty big garden because I live in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to plant vegetables when I first in my old house, but now it's a lot of flowers. So I have about 15 rose bushes. They're all named after the women in my life who I love.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them actually still need to be given names, but most of them have names after women in my life. I have a lot of perennials, and I also plant annuals. I get them as plugs and I nurture them in my greenhouse. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the summer, my garden is absolutely my happy place. I'll wake up in the morning on a Saturday and I'll be in the garden until sundown, basically digging, planting, watering, weeding. It's my pride and joy. And yeah, I like to think I'm a big consumer of art too. I love to read. Speaking of which, yeah, I'm reading the new book by Chimamanda, and I think it's really cool. It's making my heart sing. I'm about to finish it.
I'm looking forward to
So
it.
be a consumer of art is also a wonderful thing.
You know something? This is why I said when I do all these discussions, I never stick to my script. And I know that we talked about where you started, but I actually really want to know. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. Tell me a little bit about. The
Childhood.
reason why I'm asking is sometimes, like I think people that know me know that I've said some things about my childhood, about reading my parents' libraries, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
from somewhere.
I would love to. So I am from Zimbabwe. I was born and raised there, and I left Zimbabwe for the first time when I was 19. And I came from a quite privileged background. My dad was well, my parents, they had a family business. My mom is a nurse and an occupational health therapist. I'm very close with her. Hi, mom. She's probably watching this. She's actually my business partner right now. My parents are divorced now, but they weren't when I was a child. My dad, a serial entrepreneur, who studied economics at university, studied and set up a number of businesses in the 1980s and the 1990s. And Zimbabwe was a magical time in the 1980s and the 1990s. It was just post-independence.
Mhm.
The economy was absolutely booming. It was full of opportunity. I was able to go to a very good private school when I was a child. My mother is extremely ambitious, so it was a bit of a strange environment because it's a school that actually I came to realize later they had a quota on the number of Black people they would let into the school, which is a bit weird. And it was an interesting
Right.
environment for me because
I'm
there
not
were
surprised.
not a lot of us there. And then I went to a high school. There was also like a very, I would say like probably, yeah, very privileged kind of high school. It was a boarding school in a secondary city called Marondera. But it was interesting because at the time, obviously, it shaped my worldview a lot because, my dad was an entrepreneur. There were a lot of ups and downs. So there were times when it definitely felt like I was in that school, but I didn't quite belong, where I was surrounded by people with a lot of wealth, a lot of affluence, and it certainly wasn't that way for me. I went to two different schools, private schools, very nice. On my second school, I remember there was a time when it was like really tough. At the time, I was like taking the bus to school, but it was actually technically against the school rules to go to school by bus. And some of the other girls would see me, walking up the hill to go to school, and they'd be driving their cars, and nobody would stop and give me a lift because they thought I was walking for fun. Because they all thought I was walking for fun. And I had another friend who was the only other person who would sometimes walk or take the bus. And she said, "Isn't it funny nobody ever stops to offer you a lift?" And then they said, "Yeah, because we thought you obviously just exercising because, with your big suitcase with all your biology books and stuff like that." But yeah, I came from a big family. I have a lot of siblings. I'm very close to them. My sister is one of my closest friends. She lives up the street. And I'm very grateful for the upbringing that I had. Zimbabwe is great. We have an amazing education system. I'm very grateful to have grown up in Africa, to just see what I think is the future. I do think, and I think that, we are so populous. We have so much potential. People are just scratching the surface of the
I'm
continent.
coming to that. I'm coming to that. We're going to talk about Africa.
Yes, people just scratching the surface, and I feel so lucky that I got there. And it's a huge part of my identity. It's why I love African literature so much because it takes me back. It's why I started a business in Zimbabwe because I do want to have more roots more connection to my roots in that way. You know, I gave my daughter a name from my country, everything. I feel very much still very connected to that. But I still also feel British. Like I'm British now. I'm a dual citizen. I do love this country. I love the opportunities that it's given me that I wouldn't have had. Being global, being British, being Zimbabwean, they're both big parts of my identity now. But yeah, growing up in Zimbabwe, it was nice. The sun always shining, the
So that is what's really after that sunshine. The fact that, like, I love gardening as well. I not like you. I'm bad. I talk to my tomatoes, which can be quite temperamental.
what
Um,
was your upbringing like? Or do you not talk about yourself on the podcasts?
I
Am
don't
I
mind.
allowed to ask you? Am I allowed to ask you,
Course,
Kristen?
you're allowed to ask me questions, but it's going to be focused on you. But my upbringing is kind of, I would say it's similar to yours in a way. But I would say that I was born here in Britain and I was taken back to Nigeria when I was quite young. And quite a lot of people would know that if they've read about me. Then my mother came back because my father was still here in Britain. And so I grew up with my grandmother. And that's the difference between me and you, because some aspects of my upbringing with my grandmother meant that I got to know we're Yoruba in Nigeria, where we have
Mm-hmm.
Lagos is a Yoruba speaking because Nigeria has quite a few languages.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Yoruba, my grandmother. So I lived in Lagos and I lived in very interesting parts of Lagos with my grandmother. So I got to know Lagos very well. So
Mm-hmm.
one of my series, which I am actually writing short stories around, which is in here in this midnight hour, is a
Mm-hmm.
girl called Lara, who is a detective. And
Mm-hmm.
she goes around, she's a detective in Lagos with her assistant. So I'm exploring Lagos, food, street foods, and all sorts of things that happen in Lagos. So there's quite a lot of short stories I've written around her. So living with my grandmother, which was quite interesting. And then when my dad and my mom came back from England, then we moved to a city called Benin City, into good secondary school, good university in Nigeria, lived a middle class life, met a lot of expatriates because my dad was a civil engineer. So we worked with a lot of expatriates and then things took a nosedive. So fortunes changed in a way. And funny enough, I wrote an article. I was commissioned for an article recently, and that made me go back and look at the past. And it was an article that was talking about money and power and what it means to you and being female. And yeah, so I went back and looked back in my past. So, but that's kind of me. And I was so in my way of dealing with uncertainty around because Nigeria was things where we had what they call we were owing a lot of money. And there was a lot of money being owed. And in the 80s, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, decided to put what they call structural adjustment program on Nigeria. And that made it difficult. So a lot of middle classes just disappeared. So it came to either you being rich or you middle class not existing and you were just poor.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's kind of like my childhood was I loved books. I loved reading. I had libraries and I read a lot of books. So yeah, see, I
Yeah,
myself in the podcast. That was yeah. And then
I love that though. I love that.
so I just loved reading. I was just a dreamy reading kind of child. And then I decided when I came to England that after a few years, I decided I wanted to be a writer. But then it wasn't working too well, trying to get published. So I decided to go into technology.
But you are a writer.
I'm a writer who works in technology.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, later I came back to writing.
yeah, yeah. That's
You,
beautiful.
there's a-
The life of a writer. One of my, you know, I mentioned her, Bettina Gappa. She writes about how she was a lawyer in Geneva, and then she just woke up one day and she said, I think maybe it was a big birthday that came. Did she turn 40? Who knows? And then she said, oh my goodness, I can't believe like I could live my life. I live and die and I wouldn't have achieved my dream because my real dream, who I really am, is I'm a writer. To live and die and not achieve that dream. I have a story to tell or and she is very gifted. You know, when you read the work of some people, which is the other thing I'll get to like with thing with AI, you know, like I mean, I love AI. I use it all the time. I think it's a very powerful tool to help
yeah.
writers, but there is some magic that comes from the truly gifted writers.
Mm.
It's not like bog standard cut and paste, you know, the way that your heart sings when you hear a sentence constructed in a certain way. Like, you know, I gave that joke of when I read Lolita for the first time, and you think about how Nabokov writes. there's something there that is like, I don't know, like
Yeah,
it has to come from the creativity of a human mind, at least the first time, then maybe computer could copy it many times afterwards. But there's something
mm.
you can't put your finger on that talent, the way that a brain works to construct sentences in a way that just can split me wide open.
It's the combination of the author's worldview and craft. And writing craft takes a long time. I mean, it takes for me, I think it's a lifetime because you're
Mm-hmm.
still learning, you're still reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I know AI, we might as well just talk about AI now. So because AI in our profession, so in the writing profession, the controversy is the way the AI models were trained, on people's work, copyrighted work. And then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, we know that it's not going to spout out those works. It's going to use it's going to use prediction to try and write. And that's why we know it's generic in a way. But writers that use the AI tool and then they, what was it? They try to craft with AI tool. I,
Yeah, you can, but I feel like
but
some of
I,
that magic, surely some of that magic, that originality, surely some of that magic and originality can only come from a really good, and maybe it will separate like the good from everybody else. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, because I'm in this now, what will firstly happen is people will follow who they want to follow. So I have specific writers that I would always, when they write a book, I must buy their book and
Mm-hmm.
read, and that will not stop me. I will continue
Yeah.
to read their books. And if I discover new ones, and if I see an AI writing, I was quite excited when I discovered that there was a crime group in Nigeria at the moment that was formed. It's an international one, but there's quite a grassroots crime writing at the moment. And I discovered somebody reached out to me and I was quite happy. So I was very, very keen to read the books. So one of the first ones I read, as soon as I read it, I was just disappointed. That particular one, I've got another one I'm reading that is quite good
Why were you disappointed?
because it was cut and paste. It was set in the north of Nigeria, but that was about it. It could have been set anywhere in the world.
Mm.
Was no, and I was so excited because I wanted to see that writer's worldview. I wanted to see the way the writer would treat crime. I wanted to see their unique way that they will handle this. And it was just cut and paste, and you knew that it was AI. You knew it was AI that they used. So it wasn't, so I dropped it because I wanted to see something that was unique to that writer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and I love the way you keep talking about that. It's the worldview. So much of what we love about writing is taking a moment to step inside the mind of somebody or see the world from their eyes. And it's why I always write in first person as well, because I try to put myself into, yeah.
So when are you published or when will you
Oh
get?
my goodness, no, I'm not. I wish
Why?
I'm so
Why?
far away from
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Uh,
why not getting published? What's going on there?
I'm so far away from it. And then I do this
What
thing
makes
where
you think you're
sometimes
far
I
away?
make progress and then I read a book that I'm like, and then I read a book that's, oh, my necklace is coming up. And then I read a book that's so good. And then I'm like, no, I need to go back and perfect my craft more. I feel like I'm very far away from being ready to share it, but I'm also not in a rush.
Okay. Yeah, that I mean,
Um,
you take it. Everybody, we all have our own different journey.
exactly. And the other thing I wonder is whether I should write under a nom de plume.
You could write any way you want to. You could
I
write
should write under a nom de plume so I can have the liberty to write about anything.
but there are many ways that you can do it. I mean, like for me, for example, I've just finished book two. Look, I told you to for many years, but during COVID, I thought about an idea for a housekeeper. So I wanted to write like a cozy, what they call a cozy mystery, set in a hotel, and I wanted to explore wealth and poverty at the same time,
Yes.
the different world. I'm writing that at the moment, and I'm doing quite a lot of research around wealth. So I had to do quite a lot of research on hotels and wealth. Yeah, and yeah, so we'll see what comes of it. At the moment.
So when is the sequel coming out? Do you know?
It'll come out next year, definitely, because I'm tied to a contract now. I
Is
don't
it
have a
the
choice.
same publisher?
Are you talking about this book too? Yeah, same publisher. So definitely come out next year.
That's really exciting.
And then book one of the other one. We'll see when that comes out. So
I hope you have a book launch.
I hope I do. Let's see what happens. It'll be lovely to see you.
Yeah, I'll totally be there. I'll be there celebrating.
So let's come back to you. Let's come back to you. I will be moving away. So I've got a question. Yes, I'll be looking at my question. I say you've been celebrated as a trailblazer. How do you think about power, visibility, and you can answer any part of it, and being a Black woman leading in traditionally exclusive industries? Because I'm interested in knowing your view on that.
Can you ask me a more precise question?
So basically, the question is, how do you think about a Black woman leading in traditionally exclusive industries? And then you can take it to any way you want. So I'm in technology, and I don't see enough people like me in technology. I'm a tech, I, and I, for me, I'm a technical writer, but I work in high technology. So that's what I'm saying. So how in those, because what you've done, so me, I mean, my story is a bit different, but in yourself, in going into where you've gone into, where you're consulting and talking and advising and mentoring and what that in that space.
You know what? That's a topic that is so raw and a little bit, I almost feel like either if you tackle it, you should do it with authenticity or you shouldn't at all. And it's not something that I would want to answer and give like like a bog standard, a generic. So I won't respond to that one because it's heavy. And when I do have like really, really honest and open discussions, I like them to be that, like especially on this topic. And I don't want, I feel I won't give it justice.
So let me ask a follow-on question.
Sure.
So what do you advise female executives, starting out? What's your advice to them when they're starting out and they want to kind of follow the kind of path or trajectory you followed? What's your advice to them? How do you think they should start and navigate?
I think I touched on one of them before, when I said, and it was one that I said was specifically for, the subcategory of Black women. You don't have room for imposter syndrome. Uh, there's no room for it. Back yourself first and don't wait for others. Others will come, but you have to begin by backing yourself. Number two, like I've had a lot of friends, supporters, people who've helped me, and sometimes they don't come from the places you would normally expect. Sometimes supportive people are not necessarily the ones that you think will be supportive, but sometimes you are like, I'm blown away by the kind of support that I've gotten for people who've gone out of their way to help boost me, give me a platform, and so on. So find out who your friends are, find out who your network is, and cling on to it. And it's a circle. Give as much as you get. Get into the habit of giving. Get into the habit of giving early on, whether it's your time, whether it's introductions, whether it's just any knowledge you have, being generous with it. Because what I found is that people can be generous with you back. And I'm not saying, obviously, there's an issue of women having a lot of unpaid labor and so on and so forth. But what I mean more is like, we kind of all lifting each other up. And a lot of that comes through the generosity of others. So be the one who's also giving into that collective pool and lifting rather than just a taker. People recognize that. People always remember how you made them feel, your reputation. Be a woman of your word, because you asked me to speak to women. Be a woman of your word. Decide which hills you're going to die on. Don't die on every hill. Not every battle is worth fighting. Don't die on every hill. But when you decide the hill you're going to die on, go die, baby, die.
Baby, die, die.
Go die, baby, die. Don't die on every hill. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every hill is worth. Leave some battles behind. Leave some hills behind. But when you do put your stake in the ground and say, this is my battle, do it with conviction, do it with courage, do it with your whole heart, your whole stomach. And if you have done a good job of cultivating your relationships, generously putting into that pool that we've talked about, that collective pool, people will ride at dawn with you. They'll come riding at dawn. When you say, friends, I found a hill and I shall die tomorrow on that hill, you won't die alone, or at least people will come and carry you to the. It's about picking battles. And the thing is, like, life is about compromises. It's annoying, but it's about compromises. You don't have to compromise everything.
Almost like a power of community in a way.
What do you mean?
The power of community, of having your community, your own personal community around you.
Yeah, such a power in having your own personal community. And I touched on many things. You know, when I worked at McKinsey, we would always say every point should have like 3 points, 1, 2, 3. And I'm not following that. In this casual podcast, I should have done like my point number 1, do this. Point number 2, do this. Point number 3, do this. And then in summary, here are the points. But I'm enjoying just letting it flow.
Yeah.
It's coming from my heart. But I think that's, and I might watch this back and then regret that I didn't say some other things. But I'm trying not to say the generic stuff that maybe everybody else would say. Yeah, I'm trying not to say the generic stuff that everybody else would say. You kind of learn, when I say like you learn what you're made of, when the battle comes to you, you'll learn what you're truly made of, and you'll know when that battle has come.
Yeah.
When the battle comes to you, you'll know when it's come, and you'll know that this is your time to, like, I'm very spiritual. And I was watching a video of, I know not everybody who's watching this is religious, so it's not supposed to be religious, more like a story. There's somebody who's like who talks about these spiritual scenarios. It's a story from the Bible, and he was talking about a character in the Bible who was called David, and he had to fight a giant called Goliath. And he talks about how, even though it was like absolutely terrifying at the time when he had to do it, we all know who David is today because he had to fight Goliath. And it was the Goliath, that situation was brought to him in order to introduce him to the world. So ask yourself sometimes when you're put in front of a situation, is this actually your moment to, if the battle has to be big enough to introduce you to the world and show people what you're made of. Yeah, don't fight every battle, don't die on every hill, but when you do die on a hill, pick it wisely. And maybe it's because you realize this is your moment. This is the moment that has been brought to you. It's been your lifetime in the making.
And perhaps learn from the people that have gone before you as well, because there's no reinvention of the wheel, right?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So I'm going to go on to 2 areas that I want us to cover before we finish this podcast. So one of them is AI, because you know, we've got AI in different sectors and being adopted by industries. And
yeah.
Hopefully mass adoption is taking place in So what do you see the future in terms of not just of what you do, but in terms of how AI will work for the future? What do you advise people to do? Should they go?
I'm gonna see that. Stella, that's such a broad.
Should they? That's why I'm trying to qualify. Should they adopt it as part of their day-to-day?
Absolutely, you have to adopt it. It's right there. If you're not adopting it, that's really weird, right?
Adopt it for their businesses.
Yes, you have to adopt it. Everybody's adopting it. We're in the age of AI. I spend all day using AI. I use AI for everything. But I think people need to recognize that there is a place for AI and there is a place that's not for AI. And then we also need to prepare ourselves for the transition. I think that a lot of jobs are going to become obsolete, but a lot of jobs will be created as well. As a society, and whether this is like government, whether this is policymakers, I don't know exactly whether the new jobs that will be created will negate all the jobs that are going to be lost. And whether we're doing enough to prepare the next generation for the skills that they need to have in order to thrive in that post-AI world. So I have a business in Zimbabwe. I talk about it. It's a virtual assistant business. We provide human assistance to executives. And I tell all my assistants, you should be using AI. When you're asked to do task X, Y, and Z, you should obviously be using AI. If somebody asks you to do this and that, we use all kinds of AI tools, right? To make us more productive, to make us deliver products for our clients faster. But the reason why someone has a human assistant and not just goes and use the AI tools by themselves is because they obviously expect some human reasoning, some human judgment, some human correction to take place. And it's still so valuable. When I'm training people, which I train all of them myself, I can always tell when someone is just like box standard picking up things from AI. And I turn around and say to them, I have ChatGPT.
I don't need
I have ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I could have gone and put that into ChatGPT and get the same box standard answer that you gave me. I have ChatGPT. I don't need you to go do a search on ChatGPT for me. And then by the time they're done with their training, they understand that ChatGPT is just a tool, but they add the human touch, the nuance, the reasoning, checking, making sure that something is reasonable, sensible. Yes, you can make a first draft of an email, but a lot of times it's not sensible. Yes, you can do a piece of research, but the answers that are coming out are just nonsense. It's hallucinating. You haven't checked this and that, but it makes you do things faster. I think that we do need to be careful. There's obviously a lot of ethical bias that has been, there's a lot of bias and a lot of ethical considerations in AI. And this is something that's been flagged for a long time. Like years and years ago, that book came out called Invisible Women. And that talked about the way that we're feeding these models biased data. I did an exercise the other day where I said to ChatGPT, who I spend all day with, ChatGPT, who knows me better than myself, because I spend so much time in ChatGPT. What do you think I look like based on what I've told you? And then it just generated a picture of some dude. And I did it because I'd seen a lot of other women doing the same exercise.
You.
So we have to remember, like, we are training the AI in our interactions with it and all the content we produce that it produces. We are training it and we're teaching it. But there's so much bias that's already gone into it. And so it's not, as a society, we should be careful what we try to get it to do. I've seen it diagnose people with diseases that people spent months being unable to do. I use it as my own personal AI therapy bot. It's and it does everything my whole life. It's helped me with building my businesses, but at the same time, it's not a substitute for a lot of human reasoning. And yeah, so maybe not the most. Everybody should be using it.
Well,
It goes without saying everybody should be using it.
Using it as a tool and with some caution. That's it.
But yeah, but we need safeguards in place.
Yeah, that's
as individuals, and a lot of those safeguards will come from policy, from government, from legislation. There's only so much we as individuals can do to put safeguards in place, especially as they move. There are some things that they just shouldn't be moving to AI, knowing the biases that are built into it. There's some things that should just be a human.
Yeah.
Customer service.
So saying that, we know that Africa has young population. I've attended quite a lot of conferences, seminars where we know that there's a lot of scope for the future in Africa because of its young population.
Yes.
Frustrations around infrastructures and technology. Like, what do you see in the future for Africa in terms of AI and technology? Just, you don't have to look at the whole swathe. Just look at an area. Even if it's your own area, it's fine. I just want to have your idea of what you see.
I think the nice thing is about when it comes to technology, right? Because we have been late adopters, I was reading this Tech Safari. I don't know if you subscribe to the Tech Safari newsletter. And yesterday or the day before yesterday's newsletter, they were pointing out how we kind of like skip technologies because we're late adopters. We get to see the mistakes that other people make. So by the time it comes to us, we have the benefits of learning from other people's mistakes or introducing technology, skipping things. Most people in Africa never had a landline. They all just went straight to having cell phones and things like that. When it comes to AI, I think a lot of the challenges that we have in Africa are less about their infrastructure. They're related to like the core infrastructure, right? That we don't have. So where AI could be really good to solve problems where the core infrastructure already exists. For us, where the core infrastructure isn't there, AI is not going to be a solution or a solve for things that aren't there. So some of the challenges we have, like consistent electricity, consistent good quality housing, affordable housing, those are not things that AI in and of itself will solve, but it may help us to come up with solutions quicker, deploy solutions quicker, and so on and so forth. I think we're just at a different stage in terms of where we need our investments to be. But I think there's huge potential as well. Maybe that's fluffy because I didn't give any specific examples, but I think it's important for us not to forget that we have a step that we have not tackled yet as, and I say as a continent, even though there are 50, are we 53 now? 53 very diverse, very different
Yeah.
countries that are all facing different challenges. So I hate even talking about Africa as a whole because Nigeria is totally different from Zimbabwe. But yeah, so I just think we shouldn't use it to take our eye off the ball of some of the more basic fundamental things that we need.
Mm.
But I see, but I see huge potential in things like if someone is unable to see a doctor, we've already seen this now where you can put your symptoms into an AI tool and it will help you to diagnose yourself and it translates things into multiple languages. So is there a world where people can have an app that you can take out to different rural areas where people aren't able to see a doctor and they're able to get those tools easier? I am actually investing in an education app in Zimbabwe, which is an AI driven tool that will allow young children to learn mathematics initially, but we're going to learn other skills through it afterwards in a way that is tailored to the local context. They can do it in their own languages, and it's an AI driven tool. So there are all kinds of things that can help with education, all kinds of things that can help with healthcare. But imagine in a world where somebody brings the phone to you in your village and says, "Oh, great, I've diagnosed you with this illness." But unless there is a bus that comes to your village that has petrol that can take you to a hospital where you can then pay for the treatment, it's a bit of a nonsense tool, isn't it? And we're missing a lot of that. Great that you can diagnose me, but like, do we have the infrastructure and the logistics in order to get the medicine to you at a low cost? When you get to the hospital, is there going to be electricity? Are there going to be any people who can ensure that you're given the right dosage of the medication? Is it expired?
So those are all the things, the core things that we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. AI can solve some things, but if the fundamental foundations and the infrastructure and all that stuff isn't there, you still have a big problem that you haven't dealt with.
Mm. And in
Because
terms of
for example, my startup, and I have a startup in Zimbabwe that I'm set up earlier this year. Our biggest issue was finding reliable Wi-Fi, and we
in the Raxa.
asked Chennai.
Actually, so okay.
Yeah, and finding internet, moving
You're
from
going faster than even me catching up.
struggling.
Asking that.
Yeah, it's called Ask Chennai. The internet is so challenging, and we have Starlink. When it's cloudy, it's not working. We have,
Really?
and then when there is no internet, electricity is gone a lot of the time. So we got an office that has solar power and a backup and a generator and all that stuff. But when I talk about like that basic infrastructure, I'm paying a huge amount. My internet is much more expensive than I would ever pay here in the UK for all this stuff that you take for granted, just having, working electricity, having to have backup generators, solar power, all of this, just for the basics. Those are the kinds of things that we're skipping ahead. So we're deploying AI and stuff, but there's no electricity.
Hmm.
There's no electricity. We're in blackout half the time.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the thing that I worry about the most, the fact that there's quite a people are making strides here in the West. I can see the daily evolution. I call it evolution that people are evolving, and learning faster. But like
Yeah.
challenges back in Africa is a thing that worries me a bit.
What do you mean?
No, no, no. I
In
said,
terms of potential
yeah, there's potential, but
and innovation,
the
there is a ton of innovation and resilience and people doing all kinds of amazing, awesome things. But
mm,
I think it's good to be reminded of like the need for basic infrastructure. And if
what
the solutions cannot solve that first, everything else just feels a bit.
so yeah, for fun, you garden. Anything else that you do that we should know about? You spend all day because normally I would ask my guests, I'll say, okay, what other than work, what else? What would you spend all your time with? What is your obsession? I
I said it, gardening,
know,
swimming, reading
that's so
books.
yeah, yeah,
My
gardening.
kid, I'm very, very close to my kid. My husband, and my kid. We're a little unit. We exist in bliss in our little village in Hertfordshire. I'm close with my kid, and I have a very rich family life. My sister lives close by. I have a very, very rich family life, and I'm an extrovert. I'm an introvert masquerading as an extrovert.
I understand that very much. I understand that. But yeah, so I think we've come to the end of our for the podcast because I think you've said everything. We said
Thank
everything
you.
within the podcast itself. We said quite a lot. And like I told you, I don't follow I have the list of questions, but I never really follow those lists. I don't keep to it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Stella, and I cannot wait to read your new book.
Coming out next